Alright folks, so I decided I wanted to do a video, and I'll be as concise as I can, and I want to do the video about the idea of delays and kind of addressing some of the misconceptions about delays, as well as trying to maybe tell a different side of the story from the perspective of someone who's been working with commentating Counter-Strike for a long time and has to deal with it from the other side of the viewer when it comes to delays. Now, I've stopped to record this video several times, and I've either always deleted it, either because A, I listened back to it, didn't really like it, or B, I was kind of scared to release it, to be honest, and because I know it's a very unpopular opinion, probably. I know it's a topic with a lot of controversy, and obviously as a commentator who has, goals and ambitions to continue to grow themselves, grow their brand, and try to get to bigger events and, commentate, cool stuff and all the hours and time I've invested in, doing research and trying to, be up to snuff as far as being a knowledgeable commentator, it would, be a real stinker to kind of throw out a video that really just like crushes your PR, right? And so I've kind of had to sit back and think about whether or not I really wanted to release a video that could like, I don't know, necessarily tarnish my reputation, but definitely make me take a huge negative PR hit. But at the end of the day, I decided that this is a topic that was kind of important enough for me to address that I'll just do it anyway. And if I take a hit, oh well, hopefully not though, as I will try to be kind of as balanced as I can be about it, because I definitely do understand both sides of the story, basically, as I have been on both sides of the coin. So first of all, let's talk about a little bit how delays might happen. What are the causes of delays? And obviously, there is a slight variance in what might cause a delay between an online event and an offline event, a LAN. And for the sake of this, I'm just going to use the term event organizer, even though this could be like an online league or a LAN league or just a tournament or a show match, whatever the case may be. Just to make it simple, I'll just use event organizer or league in all of my language throughout this video. So for an online event, essentially some of the causes for delays could be that, internet issues, and that could be so many different things, right? Obviously, DDoSing has been one of the most popular internet issues that have occurred, but I'll kind of get to that later. Some other internet issues could just simply be a player not having internet connection, their internet goes out their house, whatever. Or let's say like a key staff member, like a producer, the one who's actually running the stream, internet or power goes out or something like that, and then that delays the stream. Maybe the match still continues on. In many cases, online, the match will still play on. We'll just reconnect back, and you may miss a few rounds because of that. I know that frustrates you, but really that's kind of out of your control. Like, sometimes it's weather that causes it, so there's not much you can really do about the weather unless you're, Zeus or something like that, I guess. But either way, so that can sometimes happen, of course, internet issues and weather issues, either from staff or from the players. That can happen. Server issues can happen, whether that be on the fault of the server provider, whether that be on the fault of the event organizer on updating their servers properly, or whether it be because a game update drops, in which case all the servers have to be updated, and that just takes time. And sometimes Valve releases updates, typically on a weekday, typically prime time for NA, and so this could happen as often as once a week, depending on when the update gets released and what's going on that day. So that can obviously cause delays as well. This also client may also cause delays, an anti-cheat client that players have to log into. Once again, that could either be the fault of the event organizer because they didn't update their client properly, it's not working properly. It could be because there was a CSGO update, in which case the client needs to be updated, so that causes a delay. Or sometimes it's on the player, simply because maybe the client works for everyone else, but for whatever reason it doesn't work on the player's computer, one particular player out of the 10 or something like that, right? And that may not be directly the player's fault. I mean, we've all had experiences where we normally open up a piece of software, works perfectly fine, but then just one day out of nowhere we get an error or something silly happens, and then we either have to Google the issue to try to fix it, or we have to just completely reinstall the application. That can happen all the time. So once again, not necessarily anyone's real fault, but it is something that causes a delay that needs to be addressed. Okay? So basically all of the things that I've just listed really, relates to online events, right? And in most of the cases, it's hard to fault anyone. A lot of these situations are outside of anyone's control, and they just have to be handled as they come. And yes, it does cause delays, but unfortunately, like I said, it's just kind of out of anyone's control. There's nothing that really can be done. Trust me, no one really wants to see these delays happen. That's one of the biggest things I could say is I know that as a viewer, people get very frustrated with delays, no matter what it may be, okay? And like, we're not stoked about it ourselves as commentators or staff members. We're not sitting here just like, woo, yes, another delay, right on, awesome, I'm so happy I just get to sit here and stare at my monitor for hours and not commentate anything, just sit here and stare and wait. And I just love, you know, looking at how angry everyone is in chat. It just, like, really just gets me pumped. Like, no, like, we don't like it either. Granted, you know, we're the ones that have to try to fix it, so we're, you know, responsible. Well, not really the commentators, I guess, because we're just kind of talking heads. We're just waiting for the admins and different things to get things sorted out, and that just sometimes takes time. But just trust us, or trust me, speaking for pretty much everyone, when I say that we're equally as frustrated when things like that happen. As commentators, as staff members, no one's intentionally trying to do this, except for maybe a DDoSer or something like that. We're all trying our best to get the product out there as quickly as possible, as efficiently as possible, and have it a good product, right? So I'll just leave it at that. So, like I said, most of the cases I've named so far have been kind of out of people's control, though you can somewhat fault the event organizer if it is like a server or client issue. They need to fix that, and if they don't do so in a timely fashion, well, that is up to them, yes, so they are responsible, but you have to understand they are working as hard as they can to fix the problem, okay? Now, DDoSing. Okay, so this is probably one of the biggest issues when it comes to delays, not necessarily to the start of a game, but in the middle of a game that causes pauses and delays and things of that nature, right? And this is usually online. Yes, there have been some DDoSing on LAN, but that's really up to the event organizer to handle situations like that. Whereas when it comes to online league play, I hate to say it, but unfortunately it's kind of on the players, their teams, and their organization, as some of the official language that some leagues have released have said. That is very true. The league or the event organizer is not really capable of helping protect a player's IP and their internet, right? They can maybe offer suggestions on how you might be able to do something, but at the end of the day, they can't hold your hand through it. Like, eventually, the player has to sit down and try to figure it out, or get help from their team or organization, sponsors, whatever, right? And if you're a professional player and this is like your way of life now, you really should invest the time and effort into figuring out a solution that's going to work long term. I just see too many situations where players will get DDoSed one day and, you know, they'll just suffer through it, come back, maybe play out the game, eventually it goes away, whatever. Then the next day, their next day's matches, they don't get DDoSed at all. And so it's almost as if the DDoSing that happened to them the previous day just goes to the back of their mind, and it's not even relevant to them anymore. And that's not really the right way to approach things, because you didn't really get rid of the problem. The problem just happened not to show itself that particular day out of blind luck, really. Like, it's like having a rat inside your house, okay? You saw a rat running around your house one day, and so you're like, oh, there's a rat in my house. And then the next day, you're walking around your house and you don't see the rat anymore. It's like, oh, I guess I don't have a rat in my house anymore. Well, maybe that's possible. Maybe the rat somehow escaped and left your house, but chances are it's probably still lurking around, and you never really did anything to solve that problem. You didn't put out any traps or whatever to catch the rat and get rid of it. So what would make you think that the rat is for sure gone, you know, for good? It's the same thing with DDoSing. Like, just because the problem didn't show itself one day, you didn't really take any steps to get rid of the problem, so why would you expect for the problem to be gone for good? So yeah, players do have to take all the necessary steps to protect themselves, and it's not up to the league to do that. It's really up to the player. Now, trust me, I hesitate to ever blame the victim of a situation. Obviously, the perpetrator, the one doing the DDoSing, is the true criminal here that we should be angry at, rather than the player who's just the victim. I understand that. I hate blaming the victim. But unfortunately, in many of these cases, that's really the only person who can work to solve the problem, you know, through some type of IP protection, whether it be VPNs or different proxies for different software or whatever. However, at the end of the day, I do understand that it's easier said than done. I do understand that there's so many different ways to get IPs now, very simply, or even it gets way more advanced, I'm sure, down the line with like more skilled hackers, I guess, or whatever. So at the end of the day, I feel like sometimes, no matter what, the IP can be leaked no matter what precautions you take. But at least go ahead and take all the precautions you can to, maybe avoid some of the simpler DDoS attempts that are out there, which I'm sure would still cut down the amount of times you got DDoSed, right? Rather than simply ignoring the problem, which I've definitely heard some reports of players doing, where they just won't worry about it, and they'll just keep playing on. And never really take any steps to solve the problem. So that is an issue. And that does kind of open up this topic about how the players aren't always necessarily right. I know many people always want to jump in support of the player, either via fanboyism or just simply because they like the person. People do typically have bias whenever they have some type of direct or indirect relationship with the subject that's in question. So they're going to support the thing that they are closest to, and therefore the opposing party is always going to be wrong. They're going to be anti the other party, whether it be anti the league that the player's playing in that made a decision to forfeit or suspend a player, whatever. Typically, people are always going to take the player's side, and you just have to understand that it's not always that way. It's not always as if the player is always right. There are cases where the player is wrong. When it comes to DDoSing, like I said, it's really hard to always pin it on the player unless they really have taken no steps to try to eliminate the DDoSing issue, in which case you definitely can pin blame on the player. But if they have taken some steps to solve the problem and it still isn't solved, then it's just kind of up in the air at that point. It's really kind of a gray area then on who you can really pin responsibility on. So I'll just kind of leave it at that when it comes to DDoSing. Now, if a league's server gets DDoSed or something like that in an online game, then yeah, that is totally the fault of the league. They need to take necessary steps to protect their own IPs for their servers, and they need to work to have protection. So yes, at that point, you can really blame the league for a delay if the server itself is being DDoSed rather than a particular player. But more often than not in recent times, I feel like it's been individual players getting hit rather than the whole server. But yeah, definitely could blame the league for a server being DDoSed, right? So that kind of addresses mid-game delays, right? Mid-game pauses due to DDoSing. And I did kind of approach it from the side of like players' responsibility, need to protect themselves, not really the league's responsibility, yada, yada, yada. At some point, though, there does need to be flexibility. However, flexibility is a really general topic that doesn't just relate to delays, but also relates to like rescheduling games, which I think is kind of a separate topic from ranting about just delays themselves. But in general, leagues could be a bit more flexible, yes. But at the same time, they eventually have to take a stand and enforce their rules. Okay? Because here's the thing. I'm going to try to explain this as simply as I possibly can. Right? A league cannot sit there, or event organizer cannot sit there for hours upon hours delaying the game repeatedly, for a player to solve their DDoS problem so the game can continue on with the team starting 5. Nor can they just keep rescheduling a match over and over again every single time there's an issue. At some point, you have to draw your line in the sand and say, no, this is your maximum allowed pauses, or this is your maximum allowed reschedules, or whatever. Eventually, you have to draw a line. You have to take a stand because you cannot repeatedly keep rescheduling and delaying a game because of, a delay that's being caused by a DDoS or something like that, right? That there is that. Could there be some flexibility? Yeah, absolutely, especially when it comes to rescheduling. Like if a team's game goes into quintuple overtime in one league, which is very rare, right? And they don't want to have to leave in the middle of overtime to come to another league's game. Or maybe they're in a tournament for qualification for a really big LAN, and their game goes a little bit longer than they thought it would because of an overtime or whatever, even though if they tried to space out their best of 3 here, 3 hours from their best of 1 here, or whatever. If the players took like a responsible approach to trying to schedule 2 different games from 2 different times, yes, I realize that could cause a delay in starting the second game. But there could be some flexibility there on a case-by-case basis, I think, especially if like something really rare happens, like a long overtime or something. Yeah, you should account for maybe 1 or 2 overtimes when you're scheduling the games and putting a gap between them. But in reality, sometimes crazy things just happen, goes way longer than expected, right? That's more about rescheduling than delays, I guess, but you get my point. There could be some flexibility there, yes. So I can sometimes see why people get angry at leagues and post about, lack of flexibility. But here's the key point that you have to take into consideration before you rush to go grab your pitchforks and your torches and rally against the league or an event organizer for disciplining a player or not allowing a reschedule or calling for a forfeit. You have to take this point in mind. And the point I would make is that you can't have it both ways as a community member or viewer or what have you. Meaning that you cannot get angry at an event organizer because there's a delay and then turn around and get angry at them again for disciplining a player for causing the delay, whether it be because of DDoS or whether it be because of showing up late or whether it be because of not scheduling matches appropriately far enough apart, whatever, right? You can't be so angry and frustrated about a delay that is actually being caused by the player, something happened to the player, and then get mad at the league for enforcing a rule that is designed to solve that delay problem that you're angry about. You can't always take the player's side and be like, screw this league for disciplining this player because he caused a delay to the game, but also screw these delays, screw the league for allowing these delays. Like, that's just asinine. Like, I can't even believe it when I see people, because it's the same idiots who will be in chat raging about why the hell won't this league start this game, or why the hell won't this league like unpause the game, screw these casters, screw this league for not pausing the game. Then the moment that a league or something takes an appropriate action to avoid said problem that you're so frustrated about, you then get still mad at the league. So it's like damned if you do, damned if you don't if you're the event organizer when it comes to a delay, when you're trying to either handle the delay or have one. So either, as a viewer, just take this to note, either A, you have to accept the fact that delays are okay, you have to just be okay with delays if you want to always be in support of the player, right? If you never want to see your player that you're a fan of get disciplined or punished, then you can't be angry about the delays that that player is causing, okay? Or you can just accept the fact that players are sometimes wrong, understand whenever they get disciplined, and then understand that the league's trying to take an appropriate action to, solve a delay issue. Pick your poison. You can't be inconsistent there. You have to kind of stick with one side or the other, in my opinion. Obviously, it's human nature to be frustrated, so I can't force you to have that thought process, but at least think about that, maybe, going forward. Also, just to kind of rewind a little bit here, another thing that really does cause the biggest problem with delays is not necessarily the pauses that you see in the middle of a game or what have you. It's the delay to actually starting the game, period, which has nothing to do with DDoSing, and in many cases has nothing to do with server issues or client issues or other issues like that. It has to do with the players, once again. Okay, now this is not a video just to sit here and attack players all day long. No, like I said, in many cases the league could be more flexible. In many cases a delay could be caused by a league or the event organizer, in which case they are to blame in those situations, right? But sometimes players are also at fault. They're not perfect angels, and one of the biggest causes to delays, in my opinion, is a player-related issue, which is just straight up showing up late to games. Okay, now let me just give you an example. So I have been casting this year, 2015, for the last 6 months, or a little over 6 months, for the CEVO MLG Pro League. And I cast every night, pretty much, like 4 nights a week, okay? And I cast the NA Pro League. So this is all your professional North American teams, Cloud9, Liquid, CLG, Elevate, Luminosity. You go down the line, Tempo Storm, forever I could go. I mean, there's like, 12 or so teams in the league, right? And I'm not going to name out particular teams or players, but, every night I show up to cast 2 best of 2s, right? So the first best of 2 typically starts at around 8 p.m. Eastern time, cast 2 maps. The match is supposed to start at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Remember that, okay? Then the second best of 2 will start at 10:15 p.m. Eastern time. So it allows for the 2 hours, well, a little over 2 hours. That way there's a little bit of a break period maybe, because typically a match takes about 45 minutes unless it goes to crazy overtimes, and maybe it's like a little over an hour. So you try to have that gap, and so you try to avoid having a huge gap of time between the 2 best of 2s, though sometimes the 2 mats may go really fast and there still is a big gap, and that might be why there's a delay. But whatever, you get my point. So Team A and Team B are supposed to play out at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Well, come on, like every single time it always starts late, right? It typically starts at 8:15 or 8:30 p.m. Eastern time or something like that. So there is already a 15 to 30 minute delay right there before the game even gets started. And why does that happen? Why does that happen? And a lot of the times it's because of the players, right? Because there is a built-in grace period system in some leagues where, the match is supposed to start at 8 p.m. Eastern time, but the teams have a grace period of 15 to 20 minutes or so to actually all ready up and LO3 the game. And teams will abuse this grace period system. They treat the grace period system as, okay, my match is supposedly at 8 p.m. Eastern time, but really the match start time's at 8:20 p.m. Eastern time, so that's what time I'm going to show up. So because of this grace period, teams will abuse that, which means that the game is going to start 20 minutes late, just right off the bat, almost every single time, simply because of this grace period system that is going to be abused. The grace period system isn't supposed to be abused. It's supposed to just allow you some extra time to get in and ready up. That way, if you're not right there at 8 p.m. Eastern time, you don't get screwed. Think about this for your everyday job. Typically, most jobs will give you like a 5-minute grace period to clock in or something like that, just to, don't want to get you screwed and really just grind you down right at the time you're supposed to be there. Give you a few extra minutes to account for different things that could cause a delay, like traffic or things like that. Same thing here with this grace period system. Maybe you were like trying to eat a meal and it took you a few extra minutes to get done your meal, or you had to use the restroom, took you a few extra minutes to do that. Whatever, it's a built-in grace period system to help you out. But teams will just play a scrim during the grace period time, or go DM, or do things that could have been done well before the match start time, or you could account for your match start time better before you start committing to some of those other things for a long period of time. And so yeah, players just showing up late is the biggest reason why matches are delayed. So that is a 100% fault on the player's issue there. Many of these other topics I've addressed could be player related, could be their fault, could be league related, could be their fault, but this particular instance is definitely a player issue. Or is it? Right? Because while it is definitely the player could be held accountable and held responsible for this delay because they are showing up late, you could also pin blame on the league for not enforcing the rule, for not making them ready up on time or something like that, right? But, so who do you really blame? Is it more the league's fault for not enforcing a rule, or more the player's fault for not following the rule, right? And this goes back to the whole delay situation when it came to pausing or forcing a forfeit or suspending a player due to like a delay in the mid-game aspect. We've already talked about this struggle that we have where the community will get so angry at a league for enforcing a rule to solve a delay issue in the middle of a game, simply because the player that they're a fan of or like or whatever, it gets punished as a result of the league trying to enforce the rule to solve that delay. And the same issue trickles down to here at the beginning of the game. Leagues may be kind of scared to enforce this, rule to make players ready up on time, simply because they're going to get a bunch of backlash if they actually discipline the player for not readying up on time. Because disciplinary action for a team not showing up in time and readying up on time would actually probably be just an auto forfeit loss for the map, right? In which people will be up in arms. Oh, I can't believe this team wasn't flexible, or this league wasn't flexible enough to allow this team some extra time to ready up, and instead they gave them a forfeit loss, and it was during a crucial point in the league where they were fighting for a playoff spot, and this map meant everything, and the league caused a forfeit because the team didn't show up. Well, like I said, once again, you can't have it both ways. Either you have to be okay with the match starting 30 minutes late every time because of the grace period and because we want to be flexible to let the players have, extra time to ready up so we don't have to cause a forfeit, or you have to be okay with the league enforcing the rules, disciplining the team or player, and either, fining them or, auto forfeit or suspending the player or whatever. You have to be okay with that. You can't come out and outrage with your pitchforks and torches when a league tries to solve a problem to delaying a game by disciplining the team and hopefully encouraging them in the future to just show up on time so they don't get a forfeit. You see what I'm saying? So once again, you can't have it both ways. Either you have to be happy with the discipline or you have to be happy with the delay. Now, when it comes to LAN, a lot of these things are kind of minimized. Like, players generally are just going to be there and ready up on time because there's like an actual physical admin in their face that's like making them do these things. But sometimes no. Sometimes in between maps, players will take forever, in between breaks between maps to go to have a smoke or whatever. And there should be an appropriate amount of time for players to have a brief break to kind of cool down, use the restroom, whatever. Yeah, certainly. But some players push this to the limit sometimes. Now, not all players are this way. Most, like I said, players I've met at events are really nice, really cool people, awesome folks. But some of them can be kind of prima donnas, and they really expect to be able to get what they want all the time when it comes to what types of breaks they want, how long they want them to be, or sometimes they'll even be prima donnas about whether or not we do certain things we want to do for production value, like team chats, like coming into their mumble, or some teams hate when they do this, they think it gives up tactics, or which is understandable, but still it adds to production value of the event. So there's always this debate between what's best for the players and what's best for production value, and the compromises you make between the two forces to still come up with a good product but not piss off your teams and players, right? And that's a whole separate topic. I'm not even gonna, that's a big can of worms I don't even want to jump into in this video. So yeah, that could cause a delay there as well. And obviously the other big thing with LANs is, I know a lot of people get mad because LANs take forever to start sometimes. We have to understand that when they plan the start time, you know, they didn't necessarily expect all the issues they may run into. And typically you have to put that start time out way in advance, even before you start setting up the event, just because you want to get it out there and alert people to it and try to sell tickets and all these different things. So you have to put a date out there way in advance. And sometimes you can't always account for all the atrophy that's going to happen after you set that date, for one. And for two, when you're at a LAN, there's just so much more equipment involved, so much more technology involved when it comes to production equipment, audio video equipment, networking equipment. Everything just gets multiplied when it comes to a LAN. It's no longer just 10 players' internet connections and maybe some staff members' internet connections and their equipment. Now you just have a full production's worth of equipment, all this stuff going on. And the more technology you stack up, the more risk that at least one thing will fail, and then you have to account for it and try to fix it. And trust me, I'm sure event organizers don't want it to be this way. They would love to start on time, and they're doing their best to start on time, but sometimes things out of your control happen, as I mentioned very early in the video about some different things that may happen that are outside anyone's control. And technology is one of them. You get sent a batch of product, yeah, that's actually on the people who sent you the batch of product. And yeah, as the event organizer, you can reach out to them and be like, yo, you really screwed me here. Like, you sent me a bad batch of product. I need a refund, or I need you to send me more stuff, or whatever. Or they have to rush out to just a new vendor or a new just retail outlet to try to grab stuff really quick to patch the problem. But I think at that point you just have to kind of let the event organizers, like the administrators there, really dictate down and handle accountability for who is really at fault for cases like that, rather than you, the viewer at home, try to point fingers when you actually don't have enough information to probably do so. Sure, you should be frustrated that things aren't starting on time, but so is everyone else. Just realize that. And realize that it's very hard for you to point fingers when you actually don't know who's to blame. Let the event organizer point the finger and hold someone accountable, either by firing them or demanding a refund or demanding something. You know, let that disciplinary action take place within the system itself, rather than you from the outside trying to dictate what should happen. But yes, you have every right to be frustrated. I just want you to understand what's kind of going on and understand that people are working their damnedest to try to fix it. And so maybe just lighten up a little bit. But yes, certainly you deserve to be frustrated. Also, to kind of end this, I know it's kind of long, I do want to talk about how sometimes delays are necessary and okay, and you shouldn't be upset at all. Like delays between maps or delays between series. That's to give you time to get up from your monitor and like go use the restroom or get some food or take a shower or whatever it is that you want to do on your computer that we won't talk about on this video that you want to do throughout the day. And I mean, because honestly, this happens, you know, during really long movies or Broadway shows. This happens during sporting events. You know, first of all, delays are necessary for the event organizer to make money. It's called ad revenue, and money is what makes the world go round. If it wasn't for the fact that some of these things are profitable and people can make profits off of it, then it wouldn't even exist in the first place, and you would have nothing to enjoy. So these things do have to make their money, and so that means there has to be delays to play commercials and ad revenue and things of that nature. Now, I don't admit to be some type of business expert when it comes to these things, but I'm pretty sure that ad revenue helps out a lot, and you have to have a delay between games to be able to attack ad revenue, okay? So, boom. Then from your aspect as a viewer, like I said, it gives you time to get up and go do things. Just imagine if you had to sit in your chair, glue your eyes to your screen for 8 hours straight because there was no delays between games, and because you didn't want to miss anything, you have to just sit there. That would be insane. That would be almost, people getting angry for the opposite reason, that there is no time to take a break. Maybe some people are okay with that. Maybe they would just sit in their chairs and like poop themselves or something. I don't know. But I would think that you would want just a little bit of time to get up and move around when you're watching a tournament. And so the built-in delays that take place between maps and series and things like that allow you to do that, allow the event organizer to get their ad revenue. And so it's kind of a win-win situation in my opinion. So in those cases, I think delays are actually very helpful, very positive, and very necessary. And that's like a whole different kind of delay though, right? And I'm trying to think if there's really anything else I missed. I think just in conclusion, what I'll say is this, is I'm not out to get players, or I'm not out to point fingers at players. Players aren't always at fault. Like I said, when it comes to DDoSing, if they have taken the appropriate measures to solve the DDoS problem and are still being plagued by it, well, at that point, it's really kind of a gray area and they can't necessarily always be faulted, and there could be some flexibility. However, if you know for sure a player hasn't taken any steps to DDoS, to protect themselves from DDoS, and yeah, that is kind of the player's fault for being irresponsible and not trying to solve the problem. But it's really hard to tell the difference between the two, and I know it's very hard to blame the victim, and even I'm hesitant to do so. However, on the player's end as well, if they are the ones causing a delay to the start of the game simply because they're abusing a grace period, then that is totally on the players, in which case you guys have to be okay, you guys and girls have to be okay with leagues and event organizations disciplining those types of players who do cause those types of issues in order to solve the other problem you're always angry about, which is a delay to the start of the game. Like I said, you can't have both. You either have to be okay with delays to always be in support of the player, even if they're the one causing the delay, or you have to be okay with the league taking disciplinary action, even if it means your player getting punished, if it means solving a delay issue, right? So there is all of that, and that applies to pre-game delays as well as DDoS pauses and things like that in mid-game. Now, I will say this, though. If leagues are going to put rules out there, then they have to be consistent. They have to always be enforcing it, and they can't be biased towards, like, one region or another when it comes to, like, EU games or NA games, and they can't be biased towards one team or another. They better be consistent across the board, enforcing that rule 100% in every single game that's played. If you do find any type of inconsistency as a viewer or as a player or whatever, then you have every right to call the league out on that, on not being consistent, on not being, maybe you can even call it, just not being open, not being transparent on how they make rulings. You can definitely call out people for that to a degree. I know some things are kept secret for a reason and they're not transparent to the community, like anti-cheat details, for example. But to a certain extent, yes, you can demand consistency and demand transparency for sure. And so the league is totally at fault if they are inconsistent on how they use their rules or how they enforce them. And like I said, when it comes to client issues and server issues, certainly the league or whatever can be held accountable for that, or event organizer can be held accountable for that. But once again, sometimes it's out of people's control. Just like sometimes DDoSing is outside the player's control. And it's a really gray area in both those cases, and it's really hard for you to point fingers when you don't have all the facts. So I guess just in general, I'd like to see people either lighten up a little bit sometimes, or at least be consistent in how you view things. Don't, be angry about people trying to solve a delay issue just because that means your player gets under fire that you're a fan of or whatever. You got to be consistent in your own views, just like leagues have to be consistent with how they enforce rules and how they handle things. At least that's how I feel about it. So I think I've addressed most things here. There's probably a couple things I wanted to say that I forgot to say. Hopefully people won't take this as me just attacking players all the time, because no, I'm not. Like I said, I think there should be some more flexibility on a case-by-case basis. I think some of the bans and suspensions we have seen recently have been a little bit exaggerated, a little bit crazy, a little bit unnecessary. Though I can't understand at heart what leagues are trying to do, which is solve delay issues by enforcing rules. But there's a certain way to go about it. There's a certain amount of flexibility you should have when you do go about it, and different things like that, right? So this is not just an attack on players. It's also just trying to give you some insight into delays and why they happen, and what we're trying to accomplish, and the fact that you're not alone in your frustration. We're doing the best we can in many cases to solve the problem. So I'll just leave it like that before I just rant forever. And I hope that this video was at least informative and gave you some insight. And I hope that you won't take this as me just hating people or something like that. Not at all. I just wanted to shed some light on delays, who might be to blame, many people can be, and why they happen, and how we can try to work to solve them as a community.